spread entrepreneurship around the region and country. Just for those of you who weren't around for our 5-1 Invest kickoff, this is once again what we're calling a speaker series. This is a monthly event that we're hosting to get investment knowledge out into the world and talk to investors, really knowledgeable and interesting people in the region and the country. And we want them to be really engaging and informative and educational. And so we're happy to be joined today by Ms. Azza Yahia. I'm going to let her introduce herself in a minute, but I just want to say that we met Azza last year in Beirut. She has been a big supporter of 5-1 Labs. She was recently a mentor for the tech incubator here. She also was on an investor trip that brings regional and international investors into Iraq to improve the possibility of investment taking place. So once again, she's a big supporter. She really understands what is going on, not only in the region, but also in Iraq. So it's nice to have her perspective. The goal for today is to talk a little bit about angel investing, get her perspective on sort of how she arrived at the position she's in as network manager at Mediterranean Angels. And then also talk a little bit about how entrepreneurs can engage with angels, and then on the other side, how can people start investing? What are some ways they can become involved in angel communities and angel investing? It's such an important part of developing an ecosystem and really building out the investment landscape for entrepreneurs. So with that having been said, I would also like to encourage you to write questions in the chat box as we go. We will leave some time at the end to pick those up, and so I encourage you to do that as they come to you. If you hear something that sparks your interest, please make sure to write down questions and comments. Azza, once again, welcome, and thanks for joining us. I'd like to just start with having you maybe explain a little bit of your background, how you got to where you are in this current position, and sort of start there.
Thank you, Pat, so much for this great introduction. As I had mentioned before, I love what you're doing right now at 5-1 Labs and 5-1 Invest, and taking into consideration everything that's happening globally and around the world. We need more of these funds and initiatives and work. So I'm the network manager at Med Angels, and later on in the conversation, I'll circle back to what Med Angel does. I've been working in the entrepreneurship ecosystem for the past few years in the MENA region, and mainly focused on digital investments and trends. I've also looked into public policies and regulations that affect the development of the innovation economy. So this is, like, in a nutshell, my background.
Great, thank you for that. So we'll jump in with the million-dollar question. Sort of, what is angel investing?
So I have a pretty cool story for you. Basically, okay, the term angel came from when rich people used to finance Broadway theater productions. And that's how it started. It was the people who sponsored these events. And the actual term angel investor was first time used by a professor called William Wetson. And he had written a study on about entrepreneurs and how they get their capital. So that's the first time they used that word. Just a quick definition, since we're talking about angels and angel investors, is basically angel investors is when a person or a group of people who use their personal money to finance an early stage startup.
Thank you. Sorry, if everyone could just mute when they come in, that would be great. So based on your experience in the region and And in Lebanon, what is a typical profile of an angel investor?
Okay, so there are two types of angel investing in general. First, the first type is called love money, and basically it's based on the premise of the three F's, which are family, fools, and friends. So let me tell you a small story. A long time ago, I started fundraising for a startup idea that I had, which was based on analyzing social media conversations through the use of big data. That was the idea. And I crowdfunded on Zumal. Zumal is a MENA platform for non-equity crowdfunding. And I raised $11,000. And those $11,000 were for my family and friends. So this type of funding was from my social inner circle, and it was based on trust and quote unquote love, where the term comes from, love money. So this is one way of how startups fundraise for small amounts. And now the more ecosystem mainstream way is basically called smart money. And smart money is when an investor or a network gives money in return for equity. They also provide knowledge and know-how. They provide startups with connections. So this is a more formalized way of fundraising through angel networks or angel funds. Coming back to your question, you were saying about what's happening in the MENA region?
Yes.
Right. So in the MENA region, early stage investing is quite nascent. So there has been a gap for early stage investments because previously people didn't really understand it. It was viewed as too risky. You put your money in real estate, you go for something, people were risk averse. So, and startup investments were usually delegated more to the VC world. But recently, we've seen a jump in the number of angel funds and networks in the region. So, for example, the GCC is way ahead compared to the rest of the MENA market in terms of amount of investment and number of investors. The Levant region is quite nascent in terms of angel investing. North Africa is starting to have a budding scene where Egypt is leading the way. And in August, as I'm sure that you know, Iraq launched its first angel network. So mabruk on that. And I believe it's called Iraq's Angel Investor Network. It's in collaboration with the World Bank and with GIZ. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So
this might be the opportunity. So can you talk about sort of the formation?
sorry, Pat, I lost the connection.
Yeah, we also had a power outage, but I'm back. Can you talk a little bit about how Mediterranean Angels came into formation, sort of what the rationale and logic and sort of how it collects other angel groups around the region?
Right, definitely. So when we say an angel network or an angel fund, it's basically a group of people that came together with a mutual purpose in a specific country. It could be with a specific nationality. So here Med Angels is basically an angel network federation, which brings together angel networks that are based in the Mediterranean region. And so our goal is to foster and facilitate cross-border investments between these countries and between these angel networks. So to give a more sort of concrete example, if an angel network that's based in Tunis is leading on a deal as in the process of investing in a local Tunisian startup, then they will notify Med Angels and Med Angel members about the deal. And then the members will start expressing their interest in co-investing with the Tunisian angel investors. So this is just, we're trying to promote this Mediterranean economy. It means access to markets. It helps startups scale into new territories, sharing of culture, sharing of experiences. So that's the core of what Med Angels is doing right now.
And what kind of results have you seen since you've been in existence? I mean, so that idea of cross-border investment is really interesting.
Right.
Has it been very active? Has it taken a lot of time to sort of get people to see outside their worlds?
Right. So, I mean, we started end of 2019, and then unfortunately, you know what happened? COVID
Yes.
hit the world. So things have been slower than expected. However, saying that, um, in general, when you co-invest with someone, whether it's in your own market or within across markets, there needs to be this element of trust, right? You need to trust the other person you're investing with. Have they made the proper decision? Have they done their due diligence? Do you know the rules and regulations of that market? Will you be protected as an investor? So all of these need to be taken into consideration when you're co-investing. And so definitely there will be obstacles in terms of regulatory obstacles, in terms of cultural differences, in terms of creating this trust. So right now at Med Angels, what we're trying to do is finding ways of building this trust among the different countries and among the different networks, so that we start off on a good foundation, and it will just pave the way for an easier cross-border investment.
That's great. I think we're in a similar situation, albeit sort of earlier than that, in that we do have the angel network and we have individual angels, and we're at the point where we're trying to see who can work together and sort of evaluating startups from across the region and country. And so it's an interesting, as you know, I think an interesting time in Iraq as this just is kind of happening more and more. Taking a step, I guess, to a different direction. So, one of the things that we want to do in these conversations is we want to address sort of both sides of the equation. So we want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurs, and we want to talk a little bit about investors. So jumping to entrepreneurs, we have quite a few on the call. Sort of, how would you advise them to engage with and find angel investors, keeping in mind that it's not super common here yet, but it is starting to develop?
Right. So, I mean, I would start. The first thing is word of mouth. Um, but I do recommend that startups go through a more formal process. It just makes things easier. So, getting to know the ecosystem and who are the players, being part of an incubator or an accelerator program. So, for example, if somebody is part of your program, then at the end of the day, you give them the tools to help navigate themselves in the business world, and then also part of being part of this program is that you give them access to all these ecosystem players. The advantages are access to customers, access to finance. You're helping them as you want your startups to succeed. Nobody wants to fail. So this type of support is how you find an angel investor, or at least start knowing who are the players. And then it's just through word of mouth, networking, navigating through this whole economy.
And so what would you say are some of, you mentioned a couple pros to having an angel investor. And so I'd love for you to elaborate on that, but also just what, if there are downsides, what are the downsides to angel investment?
So the biggest advantage of being financed by an angel investor is that it is definitely less risky for a startup in terms of they're not going for debt financing. They're not taking a loan. So, I mean, unlike a loan, unfortunately, if the business fails, then there's no obligation to pay back the investment. So this is the biggest pro. Another pro is that you look for an angel investor because of their background, their business acumen, their experience. You want them to be able to mentor you. You want them to be able to introduce you to new markets, to get you clients, to get you customers. I mean, if it's not only a monetary thing, if they don't have that value added, then you need to think about it twice, because it's the whole package. The whole package is the money in addition to their background, their experience. Definitely you want to look for somebody who has experience in your industry. So whether you're in agriculture or whether you're in health, you want somebody who has some kind of background in that. Somebody, if you're technology enabled, somebody who has some tech experience. um, so these are the things you need to look out for, whether in terms of an angel investor or VC fund. I mean, these are the same things that apply.
So when you think about, so I'll go back to the con question. So what are some of the problems potentially with angel investing? So
Okay.
that's the positive side, which we love.
Right.
What should people kind of be watching out for um, on the less positive side?
Well, I mean, the primary disadvantage is that you're giving away equity. I mean, depends how much equity, but in general, you're giving away some of your control over the company. And angel investors do have a say in the operations, will and do have a say in the operations of the company, especially if they feel, I've given you this money, I have shares, then, so this is slight loss of control over your operations. But at the end of the day, you need to look at what your benefits versus your, what outweighs the other. So, and another thing also I would advise startups is to be cautious on, in very nascent ecosystems. Investors might, ask for too much equity in return for their investment, because they know that there is not enough funding for these startups and that they're cash strapped. So they might take advantage of the situation. So this is like something to keep an eye out on.
That's great, thank you. Can you elaborate a little bit more? And I know there's probably no, there's no one type of angel investor for sure. There's different perspectives, but can you elaborate a little bit more on the operational piece? So if an entrepreneur takes angel investment, what is a reasonable engagement? So you mentioned, not losing control, but some input on operations. What's a reasonable thing to expect? Is it a board seat? Is it day-to-day contact? How does that relationship really go?
Right. So it just depends how invested the angel investor is. So and how much they're willing. Some are like, so there's passive investors, they're not active investors. So they might not take any role at all and just be like, okay, we're just giving you the money, we're looking for our return. What's your exit? When is it going to happen? How much are we going to make? They're not really looking for that type of involvement. However, if an angel investor is an active one, then the kind of things that they should be helping you with is legal aspects. What is the best way to register if you're not registered yet? There's especially if you're a fintech, for example, what is the legislature in your country regarding this type of technology and APIs and KYC and all the different things that you need to know about. Also, the things that they might get involved in might be HR, who you should hire and who you shouldn't hire. These are some things that they will have a say in. And they might say, okay, we will dispense money based on certain KPIs that you hit. A lot don't do that. I'm just saying these are things that might happen.
No, that's super helpful. I mean, there is definitely a range across, like you said, it just starts with even active and passive, and then there's the whole range of what an active investor might do. And I think that's important for entrepreneurs on the call to just know in general that there's a range of activities that investors might, and pursue, and those are normal and fine as long as, like you said earlier, you're all sort of aligned in the same way. I had a question for you on what you're seeing across the region in terms of types of investment. So what we're experiencing here is primarily straight equity investing. Has the landscape across the region grown past straight equity into notes or revenue-based finance? How is that going?
So the revenue sharing model is, I think within the region, it's a bit new. It hasn't been, it's not that advanced. However, this is a good model, especially if a startup is not looking to exit, right? So most investors, that's what they're depending on the exit. However, if your model and business model is you don't want to exit, you don't want to be acquired, then the revenue sharing makes sense. Paying out dividends, revenue sharing, that makes sense for the investor. I mean, obviously, they will know all these details before the investment. Convertible notes, I think it's also based on the country that you are based in. It's not as frequent as equity investments, but it is happening. And most of the time, it takes place. I mean, what I've seen in the recent past is within the GCC. They're more prone to using convertible notes. Yeah.
That's interesting. I had one more question, sort of on the entrepreneur side. I'm trying to channel the entrepreneur brain, and we certainly will open up questions for them to be more specific than me. But you mentioned trust, and you mentioned getting sort of how to engage, and there is this process that I think is normally followed around initial conversations and diligence and term sheets. What would you advise people in terms of sort of what they should share, maybe what they, at what time should they release information, sort of how open should they be with potential angels?
Well, definitely when you're having a discussion with them, whether it's through a pitch or through a breakfast or a lunch, you want to make sure that you're very clear on your business model. What's your pricing strategy? What's your go-to-market strategy? How are you going to scale? These are things that you need to sort of, there's a carrot. You need to give it to the investor. You can't hide it from them. And once there is more of a formalized sort of interest, and they seem to be serious, then you might ask for a non-disclosure agreement. I don't know how binding that would be, but I mean, and I don't know how open investors are towards that, but that could be something that you can consider, especially if they've invested in a similar startup before. So whether you're in logistics or e-commerce or something, and you feel that you have some information or some algorithm that's a bit proprietary, and they've invested in something similar, you don't want them to discuss this with the others, so this could be maybe one way of circumventing it. However, if there is trust between the two, then you probably don't need to go down that path. Yeah.
That's great, thank you. So I'm going to switch over quickly to the investor side and sort of, how does somebody get started doing this? So, whether we can touch a little bit on Iraq, certainly, and also sort of what you're seeing is sort of, I asked about the profile, but for people that are interested in jumping into investing and supporting these companies, how do they do that?
Okay, so the thing is, originally I was talking about passive and active investors. Originally, investors were back in the day passive angel investors. they would just provide the capital without necessarily getting involved. To them, it was just another investment opportunity, diversify our portfolio. Plus, in general, it was passive, but also very rare to angel invest because it was considered a very new asset class that people didn't necessarily understand, or it was also considered very high risk. Um, then investors, when they started understanding the playing field, when there were a few success stories, I mean, this is a very cliche, but the success stories of Facebook and all the others, they originally started with angel investors. So after you see these success stories, angel investment and looking into it became like more popular, more feasible. So right now, these days, angel investors have a more active role, and it's not just for pure monetary returns. So angel investing has several facets: giving back to society, helping with job creation, job starting the economy. I mean, a lot of individual investors will discuss this when you ask them and when you talk to them. So basically, it's sort of like a CSR mission that they have at an individual level. So, I mean, how will the background and experience help these early age companies? But did that answer? Oh, and you were saying, how do you create this network? So basically, in a lot of countries, and I'm going to give the example of Iraq and also Lebanon. Angel investing is very nascent. So in Lebanon, we only have one or two networks. One is active, the other one relatively passive. I haven't seen them investing in a few years. So the thing is, you have to have somebody leading this network, or one or two people who say, okay, we're going to legitimize this, we're going to register ourselves with the finance ministry of economy. Depends on each country. We are going to find a way of either creating a fund or a syndicate, and so it needs to have people who have the appetite, who are willing to take the risk, and who have a vested interest and similar interests into what they want to invest in. And they come together, but somebody needs to lead it. I mean, if everybody is a passive investor, then it's not going to go anywhere.
That's really interesting, and I think it's sitting in Iraq. It's we're at the moment where this is just starting to happen. So it's been interesting to watch it unfold. How do sort of keeping in mind maybe more of this ecosystem, how can angel investors sort of find each other or connect with startups? So we have a lot of startups that are at that point of sort of first funding. What advice would you give maybe on the investor side of like how they can research Iraq
Right.
and find those people?
Right. So, well, I would say it always starts off with word of mouth and referral. That's how your interest is piqued. Um, However, if you are interested in the industry, then you need to start asking about who are the ecosystem players. So whether it's the universities, if they have any entrepreneurship centers, start getting involved with them, contacting them. If there's any co-working spaces, who are the people working in these co-working spaces? If there's any incubators or accelerators, reach out, ask, how can I help? Whether it's through mentorship, whether you can give one-off workshops. So there's different ways of offering your services, and you sort of get ingrained into the system, and then you start knowing who are the different players in terms of startups and entrepreneurs. Also, I mean, it's always important to read about this, and there's a lot of media publications out there. Whether it's Menabytes, whether it's Magnet, whether it's there's so many out there, and just keep yourself well informed. You need to see what are the trends, where are people investing right now these days, which countries are doing better. It's just business savviness.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I have, I think, one more question. We have a chat question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the audience. And I think this question is also on people's minds a lot. So you mentioned that part of what you do or have done in the past is around regulatory environments. So I'm trying to think of what the question is. We're now a lot of ecosystem actors are putting forth startup law to make things like investment easier, registration, obviously, just general business operations. Can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about what you have seen in the region as far as progress? Like, what amount of time do you think something like this would take? Sort of, what is a good path to accomplish regulatory reform?
So regulatory reform, for it to to be impactful and to be quick enough, needs to be led by the public sector. There's a debate: does the private sector lead or does the public sector? But when there's a mandate from the public sector, then things can be signed off legislation wise much quicker. I mean, other than, the private sector having to fight for it, or ask for reforms, and when the public sector is more involved, then you can have something like fund guarantees, you can have tax rebates, you can have tax havens. So this helps everybody, from the investors to the entrepreneurs, and it's definitely also to the benefit of the public, because like I said, it helps with the job creation, with the GDP, with the economy. So in general, it's a win-win for everyone.
I'm going to put you on the spot. Besides Tunisia, who's doing the best in that goal in the region?
Well, okay, well, GCC is definitely, it has the tax havens, it has the free zones, it's giving out, I think, gold visas. They're doing so many different initiatives. They're opening up funds with other countries, so they're really working on it, and it's part of their mandate. It's part of their governmental mandate that this is what we need to do. Other countries, so there's different things happening in other countries. I could give an example from Lebanon, but you have to excuse the past year. And basically, it was a central bank mandate that we are going to form a fund of funds. And it was mandated that the banks will invest in startups, and there's a 75% guarantee. So if the banks lose, then they only lose 25% of what they invested. However, as most of us know, that banks don't really understand this asset class, right? They're more into actual physical assets. They're like, what is this idea? What is this app? What is this algorithm? So at the end of the day, they needed, the people came together and they formalized themselves, and they created GPs, and they created funds, and they told the banks, listen, give us the money, we'll invest it on your behalf. You give us management fee, and then we'll jumpstart all the action. So this started off as a government, a central bank mandate. And there's other countries who have also deployed their own fund of funds, and it was also mandated. Morocco is one of them. They have public and private partnerships. I think it's the Morocco Tech MTC, or I believe, I don't know what the acronym stands for. So yeah, and also, at the end of the day, if it's not really mandated by the government, there's sometimes the development funds who help. But like you said, regulation is a tricky thing, and especially if there is no public regulation on how to help the startups. Sometimes you need to be very weary of the legal lawyers you deal with, because some of them don't have experience in this asset class, and they will be very helpful. However, they might not know that, oh, there's a loophole here, or that you need to take care of this, because they don't have a precedent of this happening with them. So they don't have any benchmark on how to react to this. So these are just some of the obstacles that entrepreneurs and investors can face.
That's helpful. Thank you. We have one question in the chat. I'm just going to read it out here. Thanks for being here. And so does an angel investment group or network, do they invest their own private money and that money is not from corporations? Is that correct?
Yes. So yeah, I mean, the most basic format is yes, they're investing their own money. What would happen is that a startup would come and pitch, and then you would gauge the interest of the individuals who are part of this network. Whoever is like, yes, I'm in, then it depends on the ask. So if the startup has asked for 100,000 and there's 10 investors, then each one gives in 10,000, and that's how it works. And then, however, there are sometimes funds, and it could be a private and public fund. So, for example, uh, if the government wants to jumpstart the economy, they might say, well, if you invest this much, we will match you by this much. We match your investment by this much. So there's different things, but the most basic is the one that I just mentioned.
Great, thank you. I know we have another question because Ahmed has just sent me a message. So I'm going to turn over to the group. After Ahmed's question, feel free to unmute yourself or obviously write in the chat. So I'll turn over to Ahmed for his question.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ahmed. I'm one of the graduates from 51 Labs Tech Incubator in 2019. My project is Photonect. Just a quick brief. It's a photography marketplace. If someone needs a photographer, they can go to the application, book a photographer from there. It saves them the struggle of searching randomly on social media and get the right one in quality and price. So my question is, if my business is working well and I'm getting customers like regularly and daily, should I go to an angel investor or should I go to like a big investment? And how do I evaluate my business? Like, should I go to uh, an expert to evaluate it in order, and then I will apply it to an investor, or should I let the investor evaluate my business and then we will discuss that?
Okay, so let's start with the first question. The first question is, first of all, do you need to raise funding? I mean, if you don't need to raise funding, then you don't need to go to anyone. If your business is doing well and unless you want to expand, you need more people, you need to introduce new technology. So this is the first part. The second part is, how much are you asking for? Are you asking for $50,000? Are you asking for 100? Or are you asking for $1,000,000? It depends, because depending on how much money you're asking for, you go to whether you go to an angel network or you go to a micro VC fund. So this is the other aspect. And then if you go to, whether you go to an angel network or to a VC fund, you need to have hit certain indicators. So what is your revenue stream? How much are you getting in? What are your sales? What's your turnover? Hopefully you already have an MVP. So these are some of the questions that they're going to ask. These are some of the questions you need to ask yourself. So if you're a B2C, then one of the indicators could be, how many customers do you have? Okay, I started out with 0, now I have 1,000. How many did you grow per year? If you're a B2B, then I started out with 2, now I have 10. So these are, because each business will be different and each industry will be different. So these are the things that you need to check before you start talking to people. And another thing, I would advise to all startups: keep on practicing your pitch. Keep on pitching to as many people as you can. And I don't know if I should be saying this, but basically, when you first start pitching, don't go to your top choice of investor. Start with your least person that at least entity that you want to be involved in, because you want to practice on somebody else, so that by the time you get to the actual investor that you want to work with, you would have, you know, solidified your pitch, you would know how to answer all the questions, you would have worked already on your business model. So these are some of the things that I would advise on.
And
Thank you so much.
can you comment on the second part of his question? I think is a good one as well.
Yeah.
Is sort of how does he do valuation? Does he do it himself? Does he let the investor do it?
So the valuation is based on how much you're asking for, right? And how much equity you're willing to give. There's different valuation methods. There's the one which is, I think the one that they use in Shark Tank, which is the 10%. So you can just, the thing is, they keep on saying valuation is an art, not a science. There are different methods. I think the basic ones, there's 5 different methods. Just it's an art. Preferably to be backed with science from your end to make sure that you are not being undervalued. Having said that, right now with what's happening due to Corona, valuations previously were very inflated and were maybe unrealistic. Right now, after Corona, valuations have become more realistic and more in line with expectations. So don't expect valuations of what we used to see before, what happened with WeWork and other startups that dismally failed. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was really helpful. What I have right now is I have like three investors are like waiting for me to like give them my evaluation, and then they will start evaluating. But what I said is I need to for my numbers to be stabilized, and then I will evaluate my company, and then they will evaluate it. I don't know how, but and then we will have an agreement.
Well, the thing is, for them, they would have to have all your financials, right?
Yeah.
For you, you do it internally for yourself and decide what would be the best way to evaluate yourself, and then you'll see if you guys hit the same numbers, what's mutually accepted for both of you.
Yeah. I'm waiting for my numbers to be stabilized, and then I will start that.
Good luck.
We just started, yeah, last month.
That's great. Good luck.
Thank you.
Ahmed, my dad always says that he will never negotiate against himself. So what he means by that is that he doesn't often put out the first number, right? So it's a little bit of a dance on, you know, they want you to say a number and they hope it's really low, right? And you obviously don't want a low number. So I would say keep that in mind, because he uses it when he's talking about buying cars, but it's a good for your business as well. So, and we can talk offline about that, because I'd love to hear more about it.
Yeah, we should. Actually, I'm not gonna give them a number first. I'm gonna hear their number, and then I will like scream, saying that this number is so low, so they can raise it a bit.
Smart man.
Yeah.
We have one more question in the chat box, which says, do investors get paid monthly?
To investors, well, angel investors, no, they don't get paid. I mean, there might be, if you're the founder of an angel network, then yes, you are making success fees, and you will be getting paid management fees, obviously. I mean, if it's your full-time job and you need to survive somehow. When it comes to funds, usually GPs do get paid at 20% management fee, and then there's also success fees later on if there's any exits. Or so yeah, if you're a founder of an angel network and it's your full-time job, then you will be getting a salary, or it could be giving out returns at the end of the year.
Yeah, dividends, which is rare, I guess, but could happen.
Yeah.
Are there other questions? So you can once again, write in the chat box or raise your hand or just unmute yourself.
Azza, I have one question, if you don't mind, which is one thing we as 51 Labs are thinking a lot about is how do we make both entrepreneurs and investors more comfortable? And I think one of the things, especially in Iraq, and my guess is this is true in other places in the Middle East as well, is that there's just not a lot of information. There's like not a lot of data out there about the market, for example. So it's hard to, like, there aren't comps. You can't say, oh, Ahmed from Photonect is doing this well, but another business is doing this well. There just isn't that data yet. What sorts of data or information would be very helpful for the whole ecosystem to have made public so that both entrepreneurs and investors are more comfortable and have kind of a better understanding of the market and context?
Right. So if it's not data driven, because the market is still like very early stage, what would be good is like you already have demo days, right? And this is good to have them mixed together, hear what's happening, have the updates, have like startup stories coming out weekly or monthly, engaging the investors, engaging them, have them come and give workshops, mentor, let them get involved because they need to get the flavor, although right now there's no data to support it, you know. Some kind of data would be interesting in terms of your startup success stories. So, you know, 1 year later, this is what they've accomplished. This is what they've hit. This is their sales. This is the number of customers. And this is also, this will incentivize investors to see, okay, there is progress. They are actually doing something. This idea has formalized itself into a business, into a company. It's not just an idea out there. So this is one way of also putting it into perspective, giving it some numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Other comments or questions?
Yes. Sorry, Azza. Get on to a better mic. Thinking about the region, I'm based in GCC in Qatar, and which is obviously a different region to Northern Iraq. But what opportunities are there for people that want to start businesses in places where they're impoverished, like Northern Iraq or a place like Mosul, or those sorts of places where really they're very tough places to do business? And there's obviously a vast need from a social point of view for business. Right. But here in the GCC, it's, you know, it's a wealthy place and not difficult to at least move along the paths that you've been talking about by word of mouth and finding people in that way. When you're considering these other areas that have great potential, but also high risk and difficult.
I would start first with the ecosystem hubs. So, for example, in Ada, you know, you have 51 Labs. You go, you talk to them. They introduce you to other people, to other ecosystem players, support systems, whether co-working spaces, whether university programs, because that's how you put the pieces together. I mean, there will be no one person or one entity that will answer all your questions. Sometimes it's very fragmented, and there's what is happening on ground versus what the legislation says. So I mean, the legislation might be quite strict, but then when they're implementing it on ground, there's loopholes and people get to do whatever they want to do, you know. So you need to talk to on ground people. Ecosystem hubs definitely, and most of the MENA regions right now do have ecosystem hubs. And it's just like locating them, talking to each of them, and just finding out, putting the pieces together, the puzzle together, and that would be the good first starting point. And I guess also there's other things like chambers of commerce. It could be something like that. It could be sometimes the consulates of your own country in that country. They sometimes have these economic exchange programs, and they might know, you know, guide you in the right direction.
I think on the entrepreneur side, Nick, in the larger cities, even in a place like Mosul, there are ecosystem actors who are promoting entrepreneurship. Many of them are 2 and 3 years old now. They're really connected with younger people in universities. And so even where it is probably more challenging to start, things are happening. We work with a great entrepreneur from Mosul, obviously plenty out of Baghdad and other parts of the country. So in spite of the circumstances, things are certainly happening. And so I would second what Azza said, which is, you can find different actors in different locations. Certainly we'd be happy to help navigate some of that with you, but that's good advice.
Actually, so when I was in Iraq last year, we met with a few of the startups and the e-commerce startups, and they not only helped us as investors, but they also were helping the other startups and explaining how things work, because they had faced all these obstacles. How did they circumvent them, or maybe how did they not? And they were pointing out things, what to look out for, what not to. So also talking to the actual startup who has already established themselves in the market is super helpful. And usually startups are willing to help each other. They're willing to give back and to share their knowledge. So that's definitely always a good starting place.
And I think we have time for one more question. I see Randy raised her hand, so happy to hear from her.
Hi, Azza. Thank you for being here today. I just have this question, since Lebanon is very similar to Iraq nowadays, and for us to be inspired by the whole Angel Network, what inspired you, honestly? I think that wrapped it up for all of us to know what inspired you to go into angel investment and make a group of people to do the same thing and share the same vision with you.
So I don't want to sound like very romantic, idealistic, wishy-washy, but it's true. I mean, talking about Iraq and Lebanon and so many other countries, we are facing so many obstacles. Lack of jobs, low income, the stagnation of the economy, in the political situation. So many obstacles, and I feel that angel investing, I mean, it's a small contribution, but it can be an impactful contribution, because we need to help each other out. I know we're in it for the money, definitely. I will not say we're not. I mean, there's skin in the game. Everybody's looking for the money. However, at the end of the day, we also want our startup to succeed. So that is a win-win for both of us. Like, we want you to succeed. You want to succeed. Once you succeed, we are helping in a small way the economy.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that is a great way to wrap up. Unless anybody has last thoughts that they want to get out there. Okay. Azza, I want to thank you for the time that you spent with us. I said at the start, we want these to be educational and informational and engaging, and I think this certainly was. And so, you're in our network, and so we will hopefully be seeing more of you and working with you in the future. I think this. We're at a place where this is starting to take off in Iraq, so we'll continue to be looking to you for guidance. And so really appreciate your time and insight. And so thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. And trust me, I do follow up on what's happening in Iraq and the investments that are happening right now. I think recently Miswag received funding. Yes, and I hope we can travel soon, and I'll be able to visit you again, see the offices, see everybody there. Thank you, Alice. Thanks, Patricia. Thank you, Savo. Thank you, Pat.
Yes, my pleasure. One small programming note before I let you all go. We will be doing this again in December. We are going to talk about venture capital. And so that's you heard Azza mention that in her talk. That is the next stage of the investment process. So we want to have a great discussion on that topic. We'll be sending out information about that. But otherwise, I wish you all a good evening or morning, depending on where you are.
Thank you, everyone, and happy Global Entrepreneurship Week. Have a good rest of your night.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, everyone.